Okay, we're live. All right. So anyone that's coming on saying, "Hang on, I had an hour," one of us, me probably,
Probably.
messed up the time. But I'll blame Chris Madigan because it's easy. So Don, good to see you. Thanks for coming back.
Yeah,
Um,
thanks for having me. It's been a little while.
yeah. Um, I think the last time you were on was like affiliates, fees. There's all that kind of talk. All that stuff was going on. We kind of spoke the last time about how it's a vehement community. It's a passionate community. And I remember asking you, like, are you surprised at the pushback you get on certain things, or the reaction you get on certain things? It's been whatever, like about six-ish months since the affiliate fees. How have you found the reaction to that? Obviously, there's a passionate reaction at the start, but overall, how have you found the reception to that change has been to you?
Yeah, so I can't remember exactly when we talked. Was it before or after we made the pricing change? Do you
I
remember?
think it was just after, I
Just
think.
after. Yeah, so we obviously knew going into that it had been, gosh, over a decade since affiliate fees had changed. And yeah, to your point, like we know it's a community that there's a lot of passion for CrossFit, and we know when we make changes, big or small, that we hear about it. We obviously knew that that change was a pretty substantive one, and we were going to hear from folks. We anticipated, our thought going in was, hey, we are probably going to have, because we had socialized some of it and talking to owners ahead of time to try to get a feel for things on the best way to approach it. I'd say by and large, what we've seen and heard is pretty consistent with what we expected. So I'd say there's a big set of owners who, look at it through the lens of like, hey, we run businesses, you're running a business. Looking at pricing is one of more important business decisions. It's been 10 years. There's been a meaningful investment. Makes sense. And, obviously no one is going to shout at the rooftops and say we love the price change, but I think there's probably the biggest group of owners who looked at it and said, get it, understand it, makes sense. We have a pocket of owners who I'd say, and I'd say in that former category of owners, I'd say a lot of folks who have a pretty good understanding and appreciation and dialed into the investments we have been making in supporting affiliates and what comes with affiliation. So I think that was helpful for a lot of owners to say, hey, we've seen over the last year and a half, 2 years, the investments that CrossFit's been making in the team and summits and tools and resources. And so with that, we understand that that this price change is about supporting that and more of that to come. I'd say there's another group of owners who were not as connected, group of owners who maybe they started their affiliate 10, 12 years ago with, hey, I don't expect anything from HQ. I don't want anything from HQ. Aren't necessarily owners who have been as kind of plugged into some of the things that we've been doing. A lot of folks who actually were not necessarily aware of a lot of the things that came with affiliation, weren't aware that CAP was free now, weren't aware that we have marketing resources, weren't aware that we were doing summits and roundtables. And I'd say we've had our work cut out for us with that group to just, listen, educate, talk about the investments that we've made and what to expect moving forward. And then I'd say the last group of owners is, I think there are some folks who just, look at the change as, hey, my fee changed from X to Y. I'm not interested I want to kind of continue to do my thing. I'm not interested in the resources. That's probably been some of the tougher conversations. So, today we are, it varies a little bit by market. In the US, for example, we look really closely at what our renewal rates look like. How many of our existing affiliates are going to continue to renew. In the US, we're at 90%. So we're doing well. We've got some other markets where we are tracking behind that. We've got some more work to do on that front. So by and large, about what we expected. We've still got some more work to do. I'd say my biggest learning was how many owners out there we were not aware of what was available with affiliation, and how much more work we've got to do on that front.
Is there, do you, like, off the top of your head, do you know the global number of affiliates now, like where it stands now?
Yeah, I think we're just under, I don't have the exact number off the top of my head. We're just under 13,000 now. That includes both paying affiliates as well as we've got a bunch of nonprofit, not-for-paid affiliates as well.
Okay. When you raised the fees initially, you, like the royal you, not like you, Don, when CrossFit raised the affiliate fees, when that was done, there was a lot of talk about growth and investment and technology, and there was kind of a return of a return on investment, as well as the fact that, like, it's just inflation and, you know, like the price haven't gone up in years and whatever. That was kind of the duality of the message. If you were to, like, if I was an affiliate owner now, what return on investment do you think I'd have seen 6 months in? Like, what difference would it have made to me, the fact that I've paid more?
Yeah. So you know, going back to that change, yeah, some of it was we looked at it around inflation. Some of it we actually just looked at what is the existing value of affiliation, independent, given all the things that we had done leading up to the change last November. What is the actual present value of affiliation? And then, you know, the expectation that we did set was, hey, the value of affiliation should increase every quarter, every 6 months. So if we go back to it in really simple terms, and you know, obviously we're having this conversation hundreds of times with affiliates. The place we start with actually was just, if you just look at the brand alone, having CrossFit on the wall. We actually talked to a ton of owners last year and actually asked the question, how much value do you think there is in just having that CrossFit, you know, on your wall as part of your name associated with the brands? And how much business do you think you get from that alone? What we heard from owners is they estimate somewhere between, I think it's 8 and 15 new leads, new members a year come from affiliation, from just having the brand on the wall. So that doesn't include anything else, none of the tools, none of the resources, just having the brand itself. You know, you do the math on that, you know, that's north of $10,000. You know, if we look at it on a USD perspective, north of $10,000 alone in terms of return on investment, even at a $4,500 increased affiliate fee. On top of that, if we look at the things that we have invested in prior to and since, you've got the benefit now of a robust level of support that, you know, 10 years ago just didn't exist. You've got roundtables. Since the beginning of the year, we've had over 10,000 affiliates participate in roundtables. We've met in person with, through summits, events, the things we've hosted at semifinals and other events. We've met in person, I think, with about another 4,400 affiliate owners. We've launched a marketing toolkit now that gets updated on a monthly basis with resources that owners can use in their local community to drive lead gen and more membership. We have an education series that we've launched since. Most recent one was, you know, Daniel Chaffee. Daniel led a series on prospecting and sales. So how do you think about growing your membership base? Something that, you know, his team, he and his team at CrossFit Louvre are I think probably one of the best in the business at. We've made investments in SEO and SEM. So we've invested money in how do we get more organic traffic? So when someone goes to Google or another search engine, how do we make sure more of those searches end up at affiliates? We've also spent money experimenting with paid search. So how do we make sure if you search for CrossFit today, 6 months ago, it would be Orange Theory would probably be the #1 paid results. We've done some experimentation to see how do we drive leads directly to affiliates. And we've had some degree of success with that as well. So that's not an exhaustive list, but if we look at what an affiliate owner gets today as part of $4,500, I think the value is way, way above that.
One of the other things that was mentioned was technology, that there was going to be investments in technology. I remember you talking to Sean and Tommy on Talking Lead Fitness about that, and you were kind of saying that it was something that you mentioned the SEO there. I assume that SEO is just like research and like what works, finding out what works, what doesn't work. Like there's no, like when you talk about investing in that, it's investing in the skill of showing up in searches, basically. Is that accurate?
Yeah. So there's and I'm going to get a little bit out of my domain expertise here. I'm not an SEO expert, but to give you a couple examples. One, part of what we're looking at is for CrossFit.com. So you've got all these search engines that crawl the web and pull back a bunch of information to inform what results they show. The way your website is structured can be SEO friendly and predispose you to getting more traffic or not. Historically, our website was not. And so it was candidly kind of a mess historically, which meant that when someone searched for something that was relevant to CrossFit where we should show up, we were not representing well. So we've been working on, restructured our sitemap, looking at how we structure content on CrossFit.com to improve how much traffic comes from organic search to CrossFit.com. And then we've been working as well on website changes to optimize and improve our handoff to affiliates. Ultimately, if you're a new member who comes to CrossFit wanting to learn about CrossFit, we want to get you into an affiliate. And so we've done a bunch of work to experiment with our homepage. We have a dialogue now that shows you the closest affiliate. That meaningfully improved conversion rates. So more people ended up getting handed off to affiliates. We've also been experimenting with some ads, some paid work we've done on social where you actually enter your email address directly on social media and it gets sent directly to an affiliate. And that has performed extraordinarily well for us. So there's a bunch of stuff in there around SEO and SEM. The other thing that we're doing is looking at what type of searches and content performs the best, and how do we make sure that in those areas, so if there's a lot of consumer interest in strength training, how do we make sure that the content that we have created or are creating is predisposed to connect with that audience, again, so that we can get people to our website and then ultimately hand them off to an affiliate. And that's not something we had really deliberately been doing, for a long time or even ever, to my knowledge.
The app was mentioned as well, and I think a lot of people, myself included, kind of assumed that would be, or what I assumed would happen would be that the games app will become a CrossFit app, and that it would have, the open registration, some seminars near you, affiliates near you, a map, education pieces, like whether they're online things or book your seminar or whatever. News broke recently there, was it last week on Barbell Spin, that you guys had taken out a trademark on the word CrossFit being used in online technology applications, basically. Is that to do with that? Is there an app in the pipeline, or?
That the stuff that got posted last week, I don't know. I'll have to go back and check the dates. I know there was some stuff surfaced last week from IP filings from 2020. So stuff from way back. I don't know if it applies to that specific one or not. I can follow up on that. What I will say is we have made some investments in our app. I think it's safe to assume that over time, that convergence that you talked about of games and CrossFit coming together, that is the direction. Right now we are, a lot of the work that we've been doing is support of the game season and sport, but our intention over time, we have pulled in CAP, for example. We pulled in our programming, into the mobile experience. We want to host kind of benchmark workouts like Chad in the mobile experience. Over time, you can expect that we want to pull more of the experience into the mobile app. So it's not just a dedicated sport app, it's a CrossFit app, and that'll take time.
It's saying that the standard character mark filing was applied on Wednesday, June 12th by Feldman, attorney at Record. So then I guess people like myself included thought, this is, we're getting closer to an app being launched rather than a kind of hypothetical pipeline kind of thing. And that I guess people were asking, would this be for CrossFit to use in their app, as in here, download a direct-to-consumer app where you can download the CrossFit app and you can do CrossFit at home, or you can do CrossFit wherever? Or would it be a case that, say I follow Sentinel Training, would they be able to say that they provide CrossFit training because the name is, they'd have access to use the name because it's been trademarked by you guys now? Do you understand what I mean?
I think so. Let me answer it and you can follow up if I don't. So the first thing I'll say, yeah, that filing is not tied to any big, meaningful thing that we're working on. There's a lot of work we do on IP that just happens on an ongoing basis. I suspect it's just related to that. So no big unveiling. In the short term for us right now, no. I think you're asking, is there a separate direct to consumer programming offering that we're going to launch?
Yeah, is it like, as in, are you guys, is the app and is the kind of all the trademarks that are being done and stuff and the development of the application, is that to target people, as well as trying to get people into affiliates? Is it targeting people who want to train at home and targeting people? Is it going to rival the likes of Street Parking or Proven or whatever with the online offering?
Oh, gotcha. We don't have plans right now for a big effort in like a street parking or Proven competitor. You know, we do have in the app right now. You can access the workout of the day. We'll continue to make that investment. I think we'll continue to build on trying to make that more engaging, more approachable. But our focus right now on growth and engaging with members is through the lens of affiliates. Affiliates are and kind of continue to be the number one priority for us right now.
Okay. There was kind of a clip. Someone posted a clip recently about CrossFit being sold and that it was up for sale and that it was going to be sold.
Some irresponsible, non-fact check person must have posted that, huh?
Total shy talk. But you know, there was kind of talk about how you had been in Oslo and someone asked a question, is CrossFit for sale? And you, with all the full facts now, we know that you said something along the lines of, I mean, it will be sold at some point. That's the nature of PE. It's not currently like being sold, but it will be sold at some point. Usually it's 3 to 5 years. That's kind of the lifespan of a
5 to 7.
Okay, 5 to 7. Where are we now? We're like year 4, entering year 4.
Yeah, I think it'll be year 4 in August.
Okay. And then is it a case of like, so who like what happens when PE, so they come in, they buy it, they like increase profits, decrease costs, like make it look like, you know, make it a more profitable, desirable company to purchase, and then they sell it, they recoup their investment, they move on, whatever. The ways of doing that, I guess, are increasing income. So affiliate fees will be one way of doing that. Decreasing costs. So, you know, maybe like moving from Madison to Dickies, where it's a more attractive offering for the games team to be there rather than Madison financially, or, you know, moving on the adaptive field and the age group field, that cuts costs. Taking on additional sponsors, like as well as having GoRuck, there's like Northern Spirit, these other companies like that, you know, cuts costs and brings in revenue. And then there's also been, I've heard like the phrase I've heard a few times is like trimming the fat and like, you know, cutting out certain people. Some people have been let go, like a lot of people have been let go, some people have been brought in. How do you know, like, how do you decide when you're trimming the fat, how do you decide like what's a useful muscle and then what's just like lard? Like how do you pick like what to get rid of and what to keep?
Really lean into the metaphor.
Yeah, like it's just because I mean you see some people have been let go, like, you know, like Tyson and Mariah were let go from the media side, and then you look at the YouTube channel and there's been, you know, one video in the last whatever 3 or 4 months, like, you know, there seems to be like I guess is it like a learn as you go thing where you get rid of someone or something, a department or a job that's being done by someone, and then after a while you're like, oh shit, maybe that was a muscle, actually we should probably bring that back. Like how do you assess the success of the trimming of the fat?
Yeah, that's a good question, and you know, obviously we've been spending a lot of time. Let me maybe just start with you know, I think where you started and like, where are we and what does success look like over the next few years for us? Like, how does Berkshire think about it? And then I'll promise I'll get to the details on it. But so, yeah, we were, you know, basically CrossFit was sold in 2020 to Berkshire. They are an investment firm. You know, they're in the business of identifying businesses that they think have the potential to be worth more. And over some period of time, supporting that growth period, and then finding, you know, a buyer on the other end. And, you know, as I mentioned before, there's no like hard and fast rule. So I don't want to infer that there is, but generally for a firm like Berkshire's, roughly it's a 5 to 7 year window. So, you know, we are coming up on 4 years. And yes, from the moment that CrossFit was sold to PE, we knew at that point there would be a point in the future where Berkshire would then sell it to someone else. So that is the eventual outcome. We are not in the window now where they're actively looking to sell. So that was the piece that I wanted to make sure we clarify. Right now, we are focused on how do we invest in CrossFit in the community to make this more valuable. I think the other thing that's like important to keep in mind is like, I think it's a reasonable assumption to assume that at some point, right, Berkshire needs to find a seller who can look at CrossFit and believe that there's continued growth and value ahead of it. So we need to make sure that, I think our job, if you look at it purely, just look at it purely for a second through the financial lens, it's really important to make sure that the business is healthy and strong at some future points of sale. And so things that we would do, that we could do in the short term, for example, if you wanted to like massively eliminate costs, there are things that you would potentially do there that would hurt the business, that would make it less healthy, that would make it less attractive. And so I think, what's really important here is to understand that like our job, my job is to make sure that over the next X years, that the community and the business remains healthy, and that a really smart, savvy potential owner of the business would look at CrossFit and say, holy cow, I can see a continued path to impact and growth here. And I want to be along for that next phase. And so now, what we're focused on is, we want to basically tell a story of growth. Like that is the most compelling story and specifically earnings growth. And so, if we look at top line revenue, the amount of dollars that we bring in simple terms, minus how much we spend, the delta there in oversimplified terms is earnings. And our job is to make sure that we have healthy, ideally growing earnings. And there's in simple terms, two ways to do it. We can grow top line revenue. We can find more revenue in a way that supports growth of the business, or we can run more efficiently. We can find opportunities to do things more efficiently. Speaking specific, and we're doing both of those things. So we are honestly, I would like to do the ones that are fun are the ones that are all about top line growth. But there are areas, candidly, where if I looked at where we were 2 years ago, CrossFit had grown from 100 to 200 employees in like 18 months. We had grown super fast. The amount of money we were spending had ballooned really, really fast between 2019 and 2022. There were things that we were doing that I don't think were helping the community, that were not having an impact on the business. And so what we've been trying to do over the course of the last year and a half is, first and foremost, let's see if we can find areas to grow. So, you heard me, my first message when I started was like, the rising tide that lifts all boats is getting more people into affiliates. Let's grow the ecosystem. Let's grow value. Everybody benefits from it. That's hard work, but we're making progress. CrossFit grew, the number of members we think grew by about 4% last year. So it's growing, not as fast as we would like, but there's growth there. Looking at opportunities to drive revenue in other areas. And then finally, on the cost side, taking a really hard look at every dollar we spend to make sure it is aligned with creating value for the community. And, I'll be honest, some of them are easier. So I'll give you an example. If we're going to, do some paid search, spend money on advertising, we know how much we spend. We know the impact of how many new members, and we can do the rough math to say, hey, is it worth X to acquire Y? There are others where actually tracing the impact is much, much harder, where there's not a direct correlate. If you're doing, for example, media is a really good example. I believe media is important. It's been an area of much discussion and debate within the community.
Has it?
I probably haven't noticed. I definitely haven't noticed. That one's really, I do believe in it, but it's also one that's really hard. And some folks will say, look, we know it works. We should do it. There's a degree of that I agree with. It's also an area where, historically, I think there were times when CrossFit spent too much money on it. Yes, some of this comes out of affiliate fees, and our job is to be as rigorous as we can. So, some cases we can see the direct impact of dollars we spend. There are others where we have to use our judgment. There'll be cases where hopefully we get it right more often than not. There are some cases maybe where we'll look back and say, gosh, we made this change and actually it's having a negative impact. And in those cases, our job is to kind of course correct on it.
I think maybe it was about a year ago, maybe it was only the turn of the year, but I remember you saying that CrossFit had broken even and that was like a positive step. Do you know where you are now? Like, are you on course to
We're
do that
profitable.
again, or okay, right?
Yeah. So in 2022, to give you the quick, so CrossFit, through 2018 had really nice revenue and profitability. 2018, 2019, since then had not been in a great financial position, pretty rocky. 2022, we lost a little money. So we didn't even quite break even. We were about break even, not healthy. That meant if we had some meaningful economic shock, the company and the brand is in trouble. We made changes that year. We both reduced spend and we worked at ways of actually growing as well. So we were in 2023, we were profitable. I've said before, and I'll repeat, our goal is to get to about 20%, a 20% profitability margin. So, our earnings represent 20% of revenue. That is I think a good, reasonable target to get to. I think if we were way above that, we should be investing more in the community, investing more in future-looking things to support it. If we're well below that, I think we run the risk of like an affiliate who's break even, same type of risk that exists there. So we were profitable last year. We're not near 20% yet. We've got a little bit of work to do. And as we look forward, trying to invest in the same thing, how do we continue to grow and operate as efficiently as we can?
Another one of the goals that you said there, one of the goals is to be 20% profitable. Another one of the goals that you had early doors was 30 million CrossFitters, whatever.
Yep.
A CrossFitter at every table, basically. Have you like doubled down on that, revisited it? Like, have you what would you call it? Like, defined it a bit more, as in like sharpened the focus of what it means or how you measure it?
Yeah, what I would say, so from the beginning, as I shared, and this has not changed yet, we don't have a great way of measuring exactly how many people are doing CrossFit. And so we're somewhat reliant now on kind of third-party sources of data to understand what's happening. So last year, that 4% number that I talked about, that was based on some two-brain data that they've done, I think, in partnership with Wodify. We're still in that place. We are working towards figuring out a better way to measure it. I'd say as it relates to the overall goal, I think one thing that is increasingly, what I would say that is shifted a bit for me, I still think growth is really important. I think reaching more people is really important. I think it continues to be the thing that benefits everyone in the community. What I would say more strongly now is, in the short term, our focus oriented on growth needs to be in service of, and is in service of, supporting affiliates. So, in the long run, I've been asked about this historically, like all 30 million training in affiliates. I think in the long run, that's not the case. There will be some folks. We have some folks who do CrossFit in their garage gym today. I think that will be true in the future as well. For now, we view growth as a means of delivering value to our affiliates. And so what we've really doubled down on internally as the team is, how do we make sure that things we're doing in and around growth are directly leading to new leads for affiliates that we can measure and assess. And so we have some of that data. We're in a slightly better place, but there's a little more work we need to do on that front. I'd say, like, if you assess where are we on that journey to get to 30 million, if we're going to get to 30 million, we've got to accelerate our growth. Again, we were growing at 4%. 4% is not good enough. And so we need to see that growth rate pick up if we're going to get there.
What about education, like seminars? Is the kind of uptake on that stuff where you expect it to be? Has there been a drop? Has there been a boost? Like, how is that kind of shaping up?
Yeah, so we are, I think we're above where we were last year. Last year, I think we were, we had a good, not great year in terms of top line growth. We are on the education front, started the year really strong, January, February. We saw a little bit of a slowing. We've seen that recently pick up a bit. So feeling good about, our big goal on the education front this year is increasing the number of, we came into the year one, it's really increased the number of level 2s. So our belief was one of the best things that we can do, for the community is elevate the quality across the ecosystem. And so how do we motivate, more level 1s to get their level 2? And so we set an explicit goal internally around meaningfully increasing the number of level twos. We're ahead of that goal. So we've made good progress there. I'm not, I think I'd say collectively, I would like to see, our overall volume in education accelerate in terms of growth. But overall, it's been kind of positive year on year.
One of the cost-cutting measures that I heard was that seminar staff had their Saturday evening budget cut from like $200 to go out for dinner to like $50. I don't know if you've been out for dinner recently, but like $50 is buying you fuck all. Like if you go out anywhere for dinner, that's like, hey, let's split like half a burger between us. Is like those guys, like the red shirts, has there been good retention there with like who's doing it, and like people, is there more people being inducted as red shirts or whatever? Is that team like growing? Because obviously if you want to do more seminars, you need more people, because you can't just like work the same people into the ground basically.
Yeah, so I'd say in talking to our seminar staff, I think actually the biggest request we get from our seminar staff, for a lot of them, obviously everyone has different point of views. Actually, I think a lot of our staff wants to work more seminars. And so we're trying to look at, one of the things that we have to try to balance is with the existing size of the team and the amount of demand that we have, how do we give folks on our team as much work as we possibly can? And I will say that, like, honestly, the volume that we are seeing now versus, I think peak was like, I'm probably going to get the exact date wrong. Peak for seminars was probably 2012, 2013. We are not at that peak volume. And so one of the things that we try to manage really carefully is given the demand that we have right now, and obviously working to grow it, how do we give members of that team as much work as we possibly can? We have added some new members to the team. I don't know the exact numbers. I can follow up on that. I can ask the team. We have added some. It's not a massive increase. I actually think we're in a position where our biggest thing to focus on is driving more demand rather than growing the team. And then look, on that example, I think, we, trying to do, I think our job is across the board to do the best job we can figuring out, how do we, put the dollars that we spend to the best use. And so again, I don't know the specifics of that change, but, there are probably a bunch of those that we get right. And there may be some that we look at and say, hey, maybe some of these decisions aren't the best one. But I think that actually may have been something that came from the team that we looked at and said, hey, this may be an opportunity.
With growth and change and stuff as well, I saw Jenna, she's been one of the new hires. She came over from Barry's, seems to have really bought in. Like I see on her stories like every day nearly she's at CrossFit, she's PRing, whatever, she's doing multiple workouts a day some days. She seems to really have bought in. Has that been the case, do you feel, with the majority of people that come over? Like, is it a stipulation that like, hey, you're joining CrossFit, here's what we do, and now you do it too? Or is it a case of like, yeah, it's there, if you want to do it, you can do it? And is she maybe like an extreme buyer inner? Do you know what I mean?
Well, it's funny. I met Jenna, probably 5 months ago now, maybe. And obviously she, as you mentioned, she came from Barry. She was doing Barry's. And, she played sports in college, university, was always kind of into it. Started doing CrossFit like 2 weeks in, checked in with her, and she'd already done like 12 workouts or something ridiculous. And then she told me she passed her 100th workout in it was something like 110 or 120 days. It was something, quite impressive. Look, zooming out, what I would say is not every single person, the vast majority of folks on our team have been doing CrossFit before they joined, or they've been here so long that they kind of grew up with CrossFit. We do have some folks on our team who started CrossFit after they started. The most important thing, and actually, by the way, I do tend to believe that actually having a mix is of folks who are die hard, all in, and folks who maybe a 1 day a week or less, and some folks who join the team and are new to CrossFit, I actually think is helpful. I think that perspective is helpful as we understand how to get new members in the door and how do we make CrossFit really approachable. What we do ask for and require is a passion for CrossFit and the impact that we're trying to have in the world. And honestly, I think you touched on this a little bit earlier, like this working at CrossFit's hard. Everything we do is under the microscope. Everything we do is, and look at that, there's a beauty in all of it, but that passion is required. It kind of pulls you through. The good days are easy. The hard days, and it's like any other place where people work, like what pulls you through in the hard moments is a passion for, what we're trying to do and the impact that we're trying to have. So we've got a mix of folks.
Yeah. I mean, some like I've enjoyed watching her, get involved and stuff. And then you look at like Jada Coons, he had like a baptism of fire and he rose like a phoenix the other side of it or whatever. I'm really sticking on the metaphors today. But like, yeah, like there is that kind of, the vehemency that I mentioned at the start, I guess, and there's a sense of collective ownership over it, I guess. And that leads to the passion of like, this is wrong and I'm going to say it's wrong, or this is good and I'm going to say it's good, or whatever. Recently, but do you consume like content around CrossFit, or obviously you can't watch everything, but like would you have, say, someone on your team or on the CrossFit team or whatever, whose responsibility it is to keep up to date with like what are people putting out, what's being said, what's like finger on the pulse kind of thing, and then if something like, oh shit, Don needs to see this video or hear this interview or do whatever, or do you just pick and choose what you want to watch and just like ignore other stuff?
I'd say, if we look at the overall body of stuff that's being created, I don't watch most of it. I watch very little. There are certain things that I'll kind of tune into. I do really want to make sure I kind of keep a pulse for, what's happening. Obviously we have folks on our team who are watching and engaging a ton of it. And so if something comes up that needs to get on my radar, it does. Someone will text me, they'll send it to me and say, hey, there's something here that we need to kind of talk through. And part of that candidly is just time and all the stuff that we have going on. And some of it is for a subset of the content is like, it's not helpful. There's some of it that is, look, and in this community, and I talked about this last time, like you're 100% right. Like we have a community that is incredibly passionate about CrossFit, and that is super special. And that means that, there's a subset of our community that pays attention to everything, that wants to weigh in on everything, good, bad, ugly. It means that, when we make mistakes, which we will, or when we do things that people disagree with, or there's a controversial topic, it's going to be the topic of discussion. I think the vast majority of that is, can be helpful and is fair. And there are things that there are conversations I've had, actually podcasts or things that I've watched where I've actually kind of stepped back and reflected, gosh, there is something I was missing there. And that context is actually quite helpful. And there's learning for us. And then there's candidly a subset of it that I think is really negative and really problematic for the community, and where it feels like at least it's got an explicit focus on being negative and independent of the issues themselves. And look, I think to some degree, like, in a world of social media, there are some folks who make their money by generating views and clicks, and, whether it's YouTube or these other platforms, anger and fear and outrage and controversy performs really well. It's what makes more money. This isn't unique to CrossFit. And so there's a subset of that I don't love. And I actually think it's bad for the community and bad for the brands. And maybe it's just the reality of the internet today. That's the piece that of all of it that I'd say frustrates me the most. And I wish that, we could channel some of that into just, look, I think you can be critical while still being constructive. And so that's kind of my 2 cents on that piece.
Are you talking about hitter there when you're talking about the subset?
Yeah, in part.
Like, so say Dave did his week in review today, and he commented on a video that hitter made, and said he hadn't watched the video, which I would view as maybe problematic. Like that, if you're so my wife doesn't like hitter. She doesn't like his videos. She doesn't know him, but she doesn't like his videos. And I remember talking to her one time, and she said that she hadn't watched much of his stuff. And I was kind of like, well, I mean, it's kind of a pointless argument then of whether he's positive or negative if you haven't if you haven't educated yourself in it. Which I think is like, that was my frustration when Dave criticized one of the videos that he made, said it was negative and an attack, but then hadn't watched like the video. So I guess that's what I was kind of driving at, is like, do you look at the stuff, or are you sent like, oh, here's a quote from, or here's a snippet from a larger like 30-minute piece that's like 20 seconds, and then that's you're extrapolating like what the rest of it is? Because, yeah, the argument could be made that some of it is negative or whatever, but the argument could also be made that it's holding a mirror up. Yes, that's the way I say mirror. Holding a mirror up to some of the decisions that are being made, or some of the general feelings that people, a lot of, or some of, or a few of, have regarding some of the decisions that have been made. And I suppose if you haven't watched it, that's one thing. If you have watched them and then are, coming to that conclusion that it's a subset and that it's negative or whatever, then that's another thing. But I was just kind of curious of, like, is there someone that watched it and says, hey, Don, this was said? Or is there someone that watched it and says, hey, Don, you need to watch this whole thing? Or do you say, oh shit, that's about such and such a person, I need to watch that?
So I've not watched, I have not watched the full body of it. I have watched some of it, and I have watched some that, in my opinion, represented kind of unnecessary, personal attacks on people. And then, I'll be honest too, I hear from tons of people in the community who are really frustrated by what they characterize as a really negative voice and impact that is hurting the community. And so it's a combination of both of those things. And so, look, I won't say every single video he or anyone else has made is bad. I've seen enough that for me personally to look at it and say, even if the rest of the content is great, there is some of the content that goes after people, that singles people out, on the internet, that directs, I think, a lot of negative energy towards individual people that I think is really problematic. And I think there are folks, whether it's him or other folks, who are, I think, talented enough and smart enough to be able to get their point across in different ways. So, without debating the ins and outs of the specifics of it, that's kind of my perspective on it. And, and then there have been others where, like, individual members, and look, like, you can critique. I'll put myself, folks can critique. I knew that when I took this job, part of the deal is you get critiqued. That is part of the deal in this. And, I sign up for that, and it doesn't always make it easy, but, like, I get it. And when I make decisions ultimately that people disagree with, it's fair game. I would hope that those are, debates about the merits of the decision and all that. And, but when it's targeted at individual members of our team, that's where, in my opinion, it crosses the line. And again, I think you can make some of these points in a way that, and there are other folks who are critiquing similar things in ways that I don't think create this side effect. And so, like, I'm sure you have a sense for this, but, like, what it feels like when someone is targeting you individually on the internet that thousands or tens of thousands of people are seeing, in what feels like, whether it's intended or not, a critique and attack on you. That sucks.
Yeah, I've never done anything of note for anyone to notice me long enough to say, hey, we need to talk about this guy. But I take your point.
But imagine, like, put yourself in that person's shoes, or imagine that happened to, like, a member of your family. The stress that they would be under. Yeah. And that's, like, last time you and I talked, like, I talked about how this is so in contrast to, like, the feeling you get when you walk into an affiliate. You would never see that, right? Like, it's so positive. People give each other benefit of the doubt. And again, like, I'm not saying that we shouldn't be critiqued. We should be. That's part of your job and the rest of the media. But I think there is a line. I think you can do that in a way that doesn't target individual people and cut them down and take them down. And there's that I just, that's what I would love to see,
It's interesting though. I mean, like, does it concern you at all the fact? So you probably haven't seen this, but Hiller put up a story earlier on today, and he put up a couple of stories over the last few weeks of his engagement and like reach and stuff. So he has like whatever 50,000 followers, like 98% or something is not following him. That's looking at his page and commenting on his page and stuff. So that's a very small percentage of people that are actually following him. His reach is like 4 million accounts or something in 30 days, and he has 50,000 followers. And then you contrast that with like the game's Instagram or the game's YouTube, or the CrossFit YouTube. And like, okay, yeah, you can say that you don't like his content, fine, whatever. But that's like one guy in his garage with a slab of C4 and a, busy attitude. And then like, does that concern you that that's the level of output of one person, and the level of reach of one person versus like, say we saw at semifinals, don't take my media pass away for the games for asking this, but we saw at semifinals, there was like, whatever, 10, 15 people on the floor, all CrossFit employed, contractors and otherwise, media people, cameras in hand. And then the first content we saw was like, 3 weeks after semifinals are over, there's a video on YouTube, like a short on YouTube, and there's a couple of reels. And, like, is there a...
Are you talking about...
Is there a disconnect there between like what a team of people is capable of doing versus what like one guy has shown himself to be capable of doing, even if you don't like the content?
Yeah. And look, like, by the way, this is exactly like, I think there are things that we should and can have good discussions about like this, and do it in a way like you're articulating, and in a way that doesn't come across as like, what the F is the CrossFit team doing? Look at how many people they have. By the way, that number that reported was wrong. There's a bunch of third-party media in there that happen to be wearing the same shirts. But independent of that, we should be able to have these conversations, I think. And I think it's fair game to say, hey, CrossFit, I ran a little experiment over the last X amount of time. Here's what I learned. Here's what the reach and the impact was. Are there things from that we can learn? And we should be open on our side to looking at that and saying, gosh, are there things that we can be doing better here? I assume you're referring specifically to YouTube, because there's a bunch of content we created and shared throughout on our other social channels.
Yeah. YouTube,
yeah. And candidly, I think YouTube is probably the biggest area where we've got the opportunity to improve. And so, like, does it concern me? I mentioned before, like, there are absolutely times, like, one of the benefits of the third-party media is helping identify where we can get better and where we can learn. This may be one of them. And, our team, we need to be, I tell you what, we'll set the conditions for us to have those conversations if we can do it in a constructive sort of way versus us just tuning out because so-and-so said it, it must be negative. And on the flip side, assuming, the only explanation for this is that they're clueless or they don't care, which is, I think, sometimes how it comes across. Like, I think we can actually, my hope would be, how do we actually align folks in the community who care about CrossFit, which I think almost everyone who's a part of this dialogue actually does. I think everyone actually does care about CrossFit. How do we get people moving and working the same direction? And I will acknowledge there's more we need to do on this front. We have not always been the best at partnering with folks, across the community in, reaching more people, telling more stories. We're trying to do more of that. You'll see more of that this year. We did it with a handful of creators last year at the games. We're going to expand that and do that with more creators at the games this year. I hope we can do more of that. Like, gosh, I wish we could just lower the volume a little bit on some of the rhetoric that I think gets in the way of it, because there are very legitimate things we need to talk about.
One man who's grabbed the flag and ran over the top of the trench is Dave Castro. He's like set up his athlete interviews like 5-10 minute. He seems to have walked back a little bit already. He said, I'm going to interview everyone that's going to the games, and then today he said, I'm going to interview as many as I can. I think he's realized the commitment that he made when he said that first line. And he's got his week in review as well, which is seen by some as like, like this is where you'll get your news from, and this is the quickest source, or the the source that the information is going to come from. There's an element of like control there, I guess, where, you know, I mean, I heard recently that there was a new I'm trying to think of the word, a new like protocol or whatever brought into place that if you're employed by CrossFit and you're invited on a podcast, you need to clear it. Or if you're, you know, employed by CrossFit and you're going to do a podcast or start a podcast, you need to clear it and say like, you might be made aware of by HR or whoever, media, whatever, of like, oh, this could be a talking point, just be ready for this, I assume. And that there's talk of like media training and stuff to go along with that. With that level of control or care given to interviews and people going on interviews and stuff, is there an element of like, ugh, when you see like Dave is doing weekend reviews and doing like athlete interviews and stuff, that there's like a lack of control? Like he's kind of like just a bit of a rogue, just kind of heads off and does his own thing.
Well, look, like the, you know, and hopefully I think you refer to this, like we are trying in general to make sure that we are as kind of organized and thoughtful as we can about, so like the podcast thing is not something that's unusual. Like, hey, if you've been invited on, raise your hand. Let's make sure that we're prepped, make sure that we're thoughtful about what we share. Hey, let's make sure we've got the right person at the company to represent whatever particular area. That was the intent behind it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and look, for Dave has his unique channel, the Week in Review, which has been something that's been around. I think it's actually quite an effective way for Dave to communicate in a pretty organic, authentic sort of way what's going on in and around sport. It gives him some flexibility to do things like the athlete interviews. A little, that's funny. I didn't notice that he said all 40, and then we'll see how many I get to. And look, I think we will, like everything else, it's cool, or that's going to be a cool thing to see. I think it'll be really interesting, engaging content that we learn from. And, you know, I trust Dave, and, you know, Dave has been around a long time. Dave understands the community well. He understands obviously sport extraordinarily well. He's got an audience that he's been speaking to for some time. And so I think it'll be an interesting, cool experiment to see, you know, what content gets shared and the impact it has.
Yeah, I just realized I forgot about an entire gender as well. So it's actually 80 people he's planning an interview. I think he's got like two done. So he's fucked.
Yeah.
It's great.
He forgot too that it was 80 and not 40.
Maybe. I think he has to do like 20 a week or something. But yeah, it's like, it is cool, and it's great because like you can never have too much of it. That's the thing. You can never have like so you can see the same, like you could come on. You could come on this show, you could go on like Savan's show, you could go and Be Friendly, whatever, and you won't have the same conversation 3 times. Yeah, there'd be similar talking points, and I'm sure there'd be similar like lines or like, you know, chunks or whatever to answer specific questions, but like it's not the same conversation 3 times. And the same can be said, like people are going to talk differently to Dave than they're going to talk to anyone else. Like you see it when someone comes on my show and they're a bit like maybe stiff or whatever, and then they go on Savan's show and they've got this is Savan, and like this is behind the scenes, and this is, you know, he gets the best out of everybody, and then suddenly they're telling about their dad dying and whatever, and you're like, why the fuck didn't you bring that up when you're on my show? But like it's just the nature of the beast, I guess. And then the same can be said with Dave. Like there's an element of respect there that people will say things to him that they might not say to anyone else, and you know, the more stories we have around, the better. The big success is of the games last year, where, you know, the behind the scenes returned. The Buddy Bros put out a documentary as well. Craig Ritchie put out a few longer videos than he usually does from behind the scenes as well. There was also a documentary crew there, like an external documentary crew, I think. What's the story with that? What's happening there? Is that due to be released, or is there a timeline on that?
Yeah, it's going to be released later this year. That documentary was, so we took a different tack this past year on the documentary. So historically, we have internally funded the documentary. So there's a few $100,000 usually of upfront costs that goes into creating the documentary. And then we have a partner that we work with to figure out, you know, who's the distribution partner, how do we go out to market with it. There's work we have to do around promoting it. This past year, we took a different tack, and we actually found a third party, a new producer. We felt like having a new voice. So it's actually a production company that had done some 30 for 30, if you're familiar with those before. They actually, so we didn't fund the documentary this year. So we looked to a third party to fund it. And then we have an agreement with them where They go out, they take that, they go out and sell it to a distribution partner. Candidly, that process took longer than we expected. It will be in market way longer than we wanted it to be. That's something we got to figure out for next year. The documentary is coming, but later this year.
Is there a plan? Is the same thing going to happen at the games this year? Do you think
We're figuring that out. I think we're going to do our intent is to do a documentary, and actually I like the idea of having a third party fund it and support it rather than it coming out of kind of our fees, et cetera. But we clearly need to make sure that we get the timing better dialed in for next year.
Yeah, I like anything I do to be externally funded. It's great. With the games, then obviously there's been historically a lot of talk about how expensive the games are. I don't know. Have you read that Caretakers of a Forest? Have you read that last one? Yeah. So he details in that the cost, the hemorrhaging that occurs around the games, basically the cost of the games and stuff. Is that something that could be looked at some point, to license that to somebody, to lease it to somebody, or to sell it to somebody as a separate entity and say okay, we're going to keep CrossFit HQ, the methodology, the education, the affiliates, and we'll keep all that here, the CrossFit Health or medical, whatever, we'll keep that here. And then such and such a person, Dana White or whoever, is going to lease the CrossFit Games or CrossFit the sport, and they're going to lease that for 5 years, and then we can still advertise affiliates, we can advertise whatever through that, but it's their expense now, not our expense. Is that something that could potentially become likely or no?
So, we've got no plans to do that right now, but what I will say is, look, at some point, would be open to considering, a variety of different ways of supporting sport. And I guess coming back to for me, what's really important is making sure that we're doing an exceptional job of supporting our affiliates, supporting education. In that thing that you referenced, that is the foundation that makes sport and everything else really successful. And there's been some tension. Sport takes a lot of time and a lot of resources, and there's been some tension. I will say our team in the last year our sport team's done an amazing job. So semifinals last year was really problematic for us. We actually lost quite a bit of money. And this year, the team did an amazing job, and we're in a much better place. Sport is still expensive, but I think the team has delivered an awesome experience this year, and we're in a place where we can dedicate more focus and more attention on affiliates and coaches. Yeah, and in the long run, look, I wouldn't rule out anything. We need to make sure, again, what's most important is supporting the affiliate community. If there are different ways of delivering sport, I think sport will remain and needs to remain. It's a really awesome thing for the community that serves a whole bunch of really valuable things. If there's different ways to execute on that serve the community well, very open to it.
So then if you're talking about costs and stuff, is the likelihood of bringing the games to Europe and stuff less likely than it was? No. You just need a third party.
What's that?
You just need third party funding. That'll make it could happen tomorrow if we get third party funding.
No, actually, look, part of what we've been working on the last couple of years is getting really dialed in and how we deliver a great experience, for the community and for athletes, and do it efficiently. And I think this year, look, we've had some, definitely some areas where we've got learnings for next year. But by and large, when you look at the sports season this year, it's been really successful. From the Open, participation in Open and quarterfinals was awesome. Semifinals, I'd say with probably the exception of Carson, attendance, viewership, we had the highest viewership ever in day 3 of a semifinal. Attendance was awesome. And the financials improved. We figured out how to deliver that experience by partnering with these third-party event organizers who did an extraordinary job, amazing job. I think we delivered an amazing experience for the community, and took step towards being able to take this and do it in another region around the world. And so we've been deliberately preparing for that. It remains a goal for us. And there are different dynamics in European markets, but I think we'll be prepared for that.
I mentioned do you have someone watching media? Do you have someone watching other sports? Do you because say Hyrox has ballooned the last 12 to 18 months, like crazy numbers. Now obviously it's in its infancy, and there's that aspect to it too, that it's easy to claim you're the fastest growing sport if you just started like 18 months ago or whatever. But do you look at other sports like that and say, wow, that's a really like easy to do mass participation event that we could maybe do, or like what are they doing that we could do differently or whatever?
Yeah, we do. And we've actually, we have talked about for sport, let's talk sport specific as it relates to this. I think, we've talked to two sides of sport, like how do we continue to make the elite side of sport flourish and grow and have an impact? And then how do we support the participatory side? And, if you're looking at a High Rocks, for example, I think they've done a really good job with the participatory side, right? And so we have looked at models like that. As we think about the evolution of sport, we want the elite side to grow. We also think there's huge potential to increase the participatory side. We have hundreds of events that happen organically. We do the opening quarterfinals. It's only a few days a year, and the attendance participation is great. So we've been thinking a lot about, hey, how do we give more members of our community the opportunity to compete, whether that's in something like a quarterfinals, semifinals, or a big in-person community event in towns and cities around the world. And we have looked at other models to kind of inform that. So, whether that's a sport like High Rocks, or whether it's something like triathlon, are there things that we can learn on both the community, participatory side as well as the elite side to inform that?
I haven't pulled up any comments, but I just want to pull up this one. Vincent is annoyed that I'm saying
sorry,
there's loads of other shows, Vincent, man. You can just fuck off and watch any of them. Nobody can say I'm a professional, Don, but I like what I do. You mentioned earlier on about the sale, and that eventually in time or whatever, Berkshire's, the logical train of thought would be that they would sell. And you mentioned about finding a buyer and that kind of stuff. What, in general, when that happens, when private equity, I know nothing about private equity. In general, when that happens, does the private equity company, so does, like, say, Berkshire, sell to a buyer or group of buyers that want to take over the company and run the company infinitely? Or is it regularly a case that private equity sells a company to private equity?
It could be either. So it could be an outcome where there's a financial buyer. It could be an outcome where there's look, I would love to find an investor who just absolutely loves and believes in CrossFit and wants to be a part of it for a really long time, wants to invest in it, has a really long-term horizon. That's the best, and really recognizes CrossFit's unique value and unique opportunity. I mean, as you and I both know, I think CrossFit is really unique and different. And if you haven't been in and lived in this community, it's hard to fully understand that, even if you know it's different. And so I would love to find, I think the optimal path is finding an investor who loves CrossFit, who believes that it can have a much bigger impact in the world, that wants to make sure that that we can continue to stay true to what makes CrossFit unique, that wants to continue to invest in making affiliates really successful. That's the optimal outcome. And so all the things that we're doing now is, about trying to create the conditions for that. But it is possible. There are times when private equity sells to another financial institution, could be another private equity firm, could be other institutional investor. That's possible as well.
Let me tell you about this guy called Frank. No, I'm joking. With that in mind, then, so do you feel comfortable in the job that you have? Because is there an element of well, if they sell this to someone else and then they might not want me, or is there's an element of you're laying track in front of yourself, basically. There's no you could sign a 5-year deal or whatever, a contract to be CEO, and then they could sell the company in 6 months' time because that guy you're talking about could just find a barrel of money and be like, screw it, I'm going to buy it. Do you rationalize that at all? Do you sit with that, or are you just saying, okay, it's cool, I'll just keep doing what I'm doing?
It's funny, right? Because I've had a lot of conversations with owners who when they ask about a potential sale and, hey, who would buy it, and why should we have, how can we have confidence in the future when we don't know who's going to own it? And, honestly, like other than the stuff that I've already talked through with you, which is like, look, I really believe that, whoever owns it is going to want something that is healthy and growing. No one's going to want to buy something that has, where there's been a bunch of bad decisions, but ultimately we don't know 100%. There's a degree of uncertainty, and I wish I could remove that for everyone in the community, but it's just not possible. And if I told you otherwise, I'd be lying. Same thing's true for me. And in scenarios like this, the number one person whose job is probably at risk is probably the CEO. And, and sometimes it can be, you can do a great job, but like new ownership comes in and just has a different preference. Hey, we have someone else or whatever it is. And, does that bother me a little? Of course it does. Like, I'm human and I love CrossFit and I'd love to do this for a really long time. At the same time, I guess the way I try to rationalize it is the best that I can do is just every day try to do the best job I can with our team to invest in the community, invest in CrossFit. And so if and when there's a point in time, when CrossFit is sold and there's a new owner, I hope that they can look at our track record, at my track record, and say, hey, they've been a great custodian to this community. They've been a great custodian to this business, and we'd love to have them around. And if that doesn't happen, there's nothing I can do about it now. So for me, I really try to channel that, whatever concern there is, into like just us doing the best jobs, that when we look back, and whether I'm at CrossFit for, 4 years, 10 years, 15 years, I want to look back and say, I feel really good about the decisions that we made to support this community that's had a big impact on my life. I want to be proud of kind of how we've showed up in that.
I'm conscious now that like we're kind of running low on time because I messed up the time, but I'll just 2 more minutes. During the Open, there was a lot of talk. Beyond the Whiteboard did a lot of data kind of stuff around open participation and stuff. And South Korea was like just ballooned, and it was like top of the charts. And I saw that you and I think Daniel and a few others went on a kind of a tour around Asia. Is there more of those planned this year? Is that your hope to get around to more kind of global affiliates?
So I'm doing right now, for me personally, I'm doing at least 2 of those a year. So this year I did Asia, I did Europe. So we went to Lyon for the French Throwdown, and then we hit up Geneva, Paris, Oslo, Madrid, and Barcelona. I think I've hit every region now since I've started. So I'm trying to do at least 2 personally trips a year that are, pretty much singularly focused on spending time and meeting with affiliates. And that is super valuable because while there's definitely some commonalities in all of these countries, there are definitely unique dynamics in countries like Korea, Japan. Like, you can take those 2 markets, like same region, very, very different dynamics. And so it's helpful for us to learn and hear what's happening there.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks for emailing me when I was late, and thanks for coming on and giving up more of your time than you attended. You'll be in Austin, I assume, yeah, in Fort Worth.
Yes, I will be there. I'll be in Fort Worth.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, well, we'll see you there. Thanks, Don. Good luck. I'm sure we'll talk to you next year again, I guess.
For sure. All right. See you soon. Thanks.